Boom! The intro sets the tone for the show. Safe to say, what's happening, everybody? Ryan Thomas here, live tonight on the Thomas Take Sports podcast, coming to you live from a studio in Western New York. Greatly appreciate all of you for tuning in to this show tonight. A lot to discuss in regards to the Week 4 preview and prediction. But first, I'd like to get to the show sponsor, 26shirts.com. Of course, this show is a part of the Buffalo Fanbase podcast network, Wednesdays at 8. And this podcast in particular will be reposted on the audio side of things. And it's also available on my YouTube channel, the Thomas Take Sports Podcast. I'll be putting out a lot more content on my YouTube channel as far as YouTube Shorts regarding all things NFL, with a little bit of interesting debate, questions, takes, hot takes, you name it. Throwing a lot of really cool, content out there for you, the football fans, to tune into. So, of course, every Wednesday night leading into a Buffalo Bills game, whether it's a Thursday night, whether it's a Sunday or a Sunday night or a Monday night game, we know that Josh Allen's big time, right? We know that he is the QB1 of the NFL right now. I think pretty safe to say, right? We know that the NFL wants as many eyeballs on Josh Allen as humanly possible. But I'm happy to say, to start the show, that this game between the Buffalo Bills and the New Orleans Saints is at 1 o'clock on a Sunday. I can just run my morning errands, do what I need to do, if anything, set my lineups, continue to gloss over those lineups. By the way, this week, 2 separate leagues. The Thomas Take Sports Podcast Dynasty Football League, which you guys watch the draft for that podcast, or for that league, I should say, in a podcast. I lost last week by less than a point, maybe like a point and a half. And then in another league, I lost by a point and a half as well. It was a brutal, brutal week for fantasy football. So I'm ready to put that behind me, turn the page, respect the fact that the Bills are 3-0, heading into a matchup against, probably on paper, one of the worst teams in the NFL. I don't want to get, too in the weeds with that. I don't want to think about that too much, but I have to say that the New Orleans Saints are one of the worst teams in the NFL on paper. We felt that. I felt that prior to the season starting. Once the Buffalo Bills schedule came out, I felt pretty good about our chances in this game before the season happened. Feel even better about it now that the season's, in full swing. We'll talk about the Saints in the Know Thy Opponent segment of the show, but I'd like to talk about our 3-0 Buffalo Bills, and most importantly, the 3 wins in particular. So to recap this season, the 3-0 Bills, we're talking about a win, a nail-biter over the Baltimore Ravens. We're talking about a dominant victory over the New York Jets. And then we're talking about a tight game a little bit in some areas with the Miami Dolphins. I think Miami had a lot to show their coach, their fan base, in the last-ditch effort to avoid, by any and all costs, going 0-3. That was something that Miami did not want to deal with. But they knew that it was going to be a tough task. They knew that they were going up against, as I said, the best quarterback in the league right now, and one of the best all-around teams, balance-wise, in the league. Even though the Bills have flaws, I've talked about those flaws within the depth department of their defense a little bit in certain areas. Sometimes inconsistency, I would say, in terms of who is the lion's share wide receiver, or the guy that Josh Allen wants to rely on in certain matchups and certain games. Is different week to week. That's a good thing, but it's also looked at as volatile as a fan, and especially for fantasy too. I will throw that out there. It's really hard to pick between like Keon Coleman or Khalil Shakir or Dalton Kincaid or, which one are you going to start type questions in those discussions. But in reality, this Bills offense is extremely balanced. This Bills offense has a ton of weapons. Of course, Dalton Kincaid, I think, is starting to really show signs of life. Keon Coleman was a guy that Josh Allen heavily relied on in the comeback effort in the fourth quarter against the Baltimore Ravens. And Khalil Shakir is always somebody that is looked at as in the slot, ever so reliable, ever so, consistent. I want you guys to chime in and fire away some comments in the comment section below on your assessment of the Bills' 3-0 start thus far. What is your assessment of the Bills' 3-0 start thus far? I will read some of those off. Sometimes they don't always pop up, but I will definitely read those. Jamie Norson says, we 3-0 LFG, which we know what that stands for. Baltimore versus KC. Ha, ha, ha. That's a big one. That's a big game, right? Jimmy also says guaranteed 4-0 Baltimore or KC 1-3. So at worst, just playing devil's advocate there, Jamie. I appreciate the enthusiasm. At worst, they're 3-1. At best, Baltimore, or KC could be 1-3, right? Depending on who wins that matchup. Or depending on who loses that matchup, I should say, they would then fall to 1-3, which would be great for the Bills. Talked about it in my, divisional preview segment of the Thomas Take Sports podcast. That really felt like the AFC West was a much better this year, this season. I thought the AFC West was way better. Justin Herbert, if he stays healthy, that's a big factor, as well as, some of the other new players like Ladd, Quentin Johnson kind of emerging with the Chargers, and Omarion Hampton, the rookie running back. The Chargers are a much different team. And to kind of go back to the Buffalo Bills, it is ever so clear that in the 3 weeks that we've seen, the Bills are 3-0, Miami and the Jets are 0-3, and the Patriots are 1-2. The beast of the AFC East is Buffalo again. That is not going to change, barring anything catastrophic for the Buffalo Bills. So the Bills are in a division where they're so much better than the Dolphins, the Jets, the Patriots, whereas the Kansas City Chiefs are struggling a little bit with some of these teams in the division, the Chargers namely, and I think Denver will be a tougher out. Dare I say it, I think that the Raiders are even in some form and fashion a tougher out than what they were last year, with Geno Smith being a little bit better at quarterback, more stability there. Ashton Jeanty will get it turned around. I just think there's some things to iron out. But Buffalo is the beast of the AFC East, and there's no doubt about it that the easiest way to get to where you want to go, the playoffs, the easiest way to get to where you want to go, the number one seed, is to win your division, win as many games as humanly possible, and you're going to be in that category, winning more games than anybody in the AFC. And right now, the Bills are the best team in the AFC. Other teams that have the right to kind of throw their name in there are teams that you would not expect. The fact that I can say the Bills of the AFC East and the beast of the AFC East, and that the Indianapolis Colts are led by their potential franchise solution in Daniel Jones is absolutely crazy. And I love to kind of, make talking points from around the NFL. And the numbers of Josh Allen are MVP caliber. The numbers of Daniel Jones through 3 weeks, mind you, are MVP caliber. So I'm really curious to see how this AFC as a whole kind of shakes out, even more so through the first 3 weeks of this season and what they've provided in comparison to what I even thought. So, this is that early portion of the season where fluky things happen, things that you just wouldn't expect happen. Daniel Jones going to Indy and going off essentially these last 3 weeks. I would not have expected that. I don't think you expected that. I don't think many people expected that. But Shane Steichen and Daniel Jones. And the only reason I'm really, chiming in on that is because if Indy continues to play well and KC is battling from behind and trying to get one of those top seeds, Indy could be in their way. The Chargers could be in their way. A couple other teams in their division can be in their way. So I'm really curious to see how this AFC as a whole, shakes out. Justin Herbert, if he stays healthy, then I think that could really pose some problems for KC winning the AFC West, as consistently as they have in previous years. So I want to get to know the opponent. Should say know thy opponent. My apologies on that. But know the opponent. Know thy opponent. I'll just say know thy opponent. Know thy opponent, the New Orleans Saints. Now, post Sean Payton, post Drew Brees, who's probably going to go into the Hall of Fame first ballot in 2026. I would assume so. Shout out to him, one of my favorite quarterbacks of all time. Since Drew Brees hung him up, the Saints have been what they used to be prior to having Drew Brees. Drew Brees saved that franchise. Drew Brees was, I think, one of the best free agent signings in the history of the National Football League. He might be the best single free agent signing that any team has ever had, given the situation of Hurricane Katrina and how bad the Saints were. They were called the Aints for a really long time. Fans wearing paper bags over their heads, much like they do at KeyBank Center for the Sabres today. The New Orleans Saints were a team that was a dumpster fire, and they had glory for quite some time, from like 2009 to, dare I say, like 2019, a good 10-year run. Maybe a few, years beyond that where they might have been able to hang around a little bit. They were screwed out of a few playoff games. I will say that the Minnesota playoff game, Saints, Minnesota, they lost to Tampa Bay in the playoffs with TB12 leading the way, I'm pretty sure, prior to Tom Brady going and taking on Aaron Rodgers at Lambeau and winning that game too. So the Saints had a moment in time where they won a Super Bowl, then they had another moment in time where they could have got to another one, and they just never did. And the bottom kind of fell out from under them. Drew Brees got older, Sean Payton left, and here we are. Kellen Moore, first-year head coach. I'm going to kind of dive in a little bit to, the stats leaders of both the Bills and Saints. It is startling in terms of what you'll see from the stat sheet between the Bills and the Saints. And, I will say that this is just not a game that should be circled on anyone's calendars as a game of the week. Going into this, this is a team, the New Orleans Saints, that they're just bad. There's really a lot of issues from the top down, cap-wise, roster-wise. Let's even look at the Saints stat leaders just in general to kind of see where they stand in terms of their regular season player stats. I'm going to show kind of a screen grab of this over the course of, the first 3 weeks to kind of show you guys where they stand. And some of the numbers aren't as bad as what you would think. But going into this season, I thought for certain that if Derek Carr was going to retire, that the rookie quarterback that they had drafted would be the guy, Tyler Shuck. But instead, they got Spencer Rattler leading the charge. And Spencer Rattler, through 3 weeks, has got 639 passing yards, 213 per game, 4 touchdowns in 3 games, which is extremely low, but not horrible, and 1 interception. Now, completion percentage, 67.2% in 3 games started. So clearly, he has been their guy thus far, not putting, elite numbers together when you look at the yards per pass attempt at 5.4. that kind of shows you that he's really conservative with some of his options. His top receiving option, alluding to the short pass, is Juwan Johnson, who has 176 yards on the season. Devon Bailey, who they claimed from Denver. Jack Stoll, no relation on my mom's side of the family, although she did have an uncle, Jack Stoll, which I always get a kick out of that. My grandfather's brother, his name is Jack Stoll, R.I.P. To him. Alvin Kamara, still at it. Brandon Cooks, Rashid Shaheed, one of the coolest names in the NFL. He's got a touchdown on the stat sheet. Chris Olave, that's a name that really I thought was going to be one of the better receivers in the NFL. He's had a long history of concussions that have slowed down his ability to be a superstar in this league. If he ever will be, I'm not sure. But thus far, he has not been nearly what he was expected to be. And a lot of that does have to do with a little bit of quarterback, inconsistencies. But still, injuries as well. Juwan Johnson's the story. 19 catches, 176 yards, 9.3 yards per on the catch. Stat sheet, 58 yards per game. Defensively, there are some older players on this defense, some younger players on this defense. It's kind of just a hodgepodge of players that are all average or below. Demario Davis, I feel like he's been at it for a really long time. And of course, looking at some of the other guys, Kool-Aid McKinstry was a corner that I like coming out of the draft. He's a corner that they invested in. Devon Godchaux from the Patriots played a few years there. Really outside of that, I can't look at really anybody and say, wow, I'm really worried. Justin Reed brought in. I can't really look at anybody on the Saints roster and say that I'm really, really worried. But that is also partially what may scare me a little bit, because the Bills are rolling into this one with a 3-0 record, feeling really confident in their ability to, run the table, right? Try to get to the Super Bowl, right? They've been a Super Bowl contender, dare I say it, these last few years. And the Saints have been in pure rebuild. So as far as the path that these two teams are on, it could not be polar opposite. It could not be any more polar opposite than it already is, I should say. Where we go to the stat sheet for the Bills, and we'll see just a different team, a different world with just the stats thus far. Josh Allen, 755 yards passing, coming off of a down week against the Jets. Parlayed that into a so-so week against Miami. Nothing, out of the ordinary, right? Kind of expected. Expectations met over his stats in the Miami game. But this is, to Doug Augie's point, another team in the New Orleans Saints that are desperate. They have nothing to lose. And there's a lot of trapness to this game that could make it just a shock, right? If the Bills were to lose, it would be the biggest shock. I have gone into survivor pools this week, and I've picked the Bills. I've hesitated to pick the Bills in my survivor pool just yet. I was waiting for this game to feel confident to do that, and I still don't like the feeling of relying on the Bills as the survivor pick, right? But Josh Allen, 755 passing yards, of course, through 3 weeks, averaging 250, 5 touchdowns, zero interceptions. Nobody's talking about that. For the first 3 weeks, he's got 0 picks. Hasn't even come close to throwing a pick, with a almost 70%, rounding it up to a 70% completion percentage. James Cook is on the best start to a season that he has ever had in terms of running in between the tackles, breaking for big gains. Look at those numbers. James Cook, 284 yards on the season on 53 carries, 5.4 yards per carry, a long of 44 yards, of course, which I believe he took that one to the house, or was really close to it. Yes, that was at the one. He got dropped on that one, but 94 yards per game. 94 yards per game from James Cook. And the guy that everyone seemed to, and I will say, I hate to say it like this, but the guy that everybody seemed to talk smack about. Look who's leading your team in receiving yards, guys. Keon Coleman, 14 catches on 18 targets, 158 yards, receiving touchdown. Dalton Kincaid leading the way with 2 receiving touchdowns, leading the Bills in receiving touchdowns on the season. Yeah, and I believe James Cook right there under Josh Palmer. So he's contributing in that way too. Not as much, obviously, but he is a big factor in this offense, a bigger factor than I think most realized. And I'm really glad they paid that guy, to quote Billy Madison and that meme. So Christian Benford leading the way. I think this is his best season yet. Pro Bowl buzz through 3 weeks, maybe a little bit too soon, maybe a little bit too early, but he's definitely played phenomenally. Terrell Bernard, number 8 now. It's been really weird for me going back, watching like the all 22. Terrell Bernard, number 8. Sometimes I'm looking for 43 and I realize, oh, he's number 8. Got to tell myself he's number 8, but he's played really well. Cole Bishop, these last 2 weeks, Cole Bishop has been phenomenal, especially in comparison to where he was after week 1. I could not stand watching Cole Bishop make mistake after mistake after mistake week 1, but week 2, week 3, he's really turned it around, and that's exciting, right? For this defense, maybe getting Jordan Poyer in here, give him a few pointers, maybe that helped a little bit. Taylor Rapp, Dorian Williams, Teron Johnson. You guys see what I see in terms of what this offense brings to the table, but you also see what I see in terms of what this defense can bring to the table. The secondary is always nitpicked and looked at as a point of emphasis in terms of depth. I'm more concerned about their lack of depth at the cornerback position than I am the safety position. The safety position is young. It's a tandem, a duo that hasn't really played together for that long, but the cornerback depth, guys, I am dying to see what happens with Maxwell Hairston. I need to see him back out there as soon as possible. Following a good buddy of mine, Josh Reed of WIVB, he posted some little videos, some little clips of Maxwell Hairston kind of trying to, stretch things out and warm up a little bit, just be, proactive in a practice type setting without putting the pads on. And he had a big brace on his knee and on his leg. He's doing, high knees and kind of just moving laterally to try to, just be quick and show some movement. And it didn't really look that good to me. It didn't look like a guy that was on the mend or the comeback trail. It looked like a guy that was just trying to just do something to pass the time, which was really a concern. I want to preface my statement and just say it again. I love Tre'Davious White. I think he's a legendary guy. You know what I mean? In terms of what he brought to the culture, and he was the first round pick in McDermott history here in Buffalo. But I don't like what I've seen thus far. I don't think he is as polished as he once was. I think he's a little bit past it. And I wasn't afraid to say that when I saw that the Bills brought him in. And I'm certainly not afraid to say it now. And I'm not saying like, oh, I told you so. I'm saying it out of concern. You have one guy in Christian Benford who's doing all the right things, who's getting better as he plays each week because he's in a young state in his career and a young point in his career, whereas Tre'Davious White is just not what he was. And to rely on Dorian Strong, who was a late round draft pick, over Tre'Davious White, I think is worthy only in the sense of age and just time, working against the players. But I think that Maxwell Hairston is going to provide, once he's ready, I think he's going to provide a big juice to this defense, especially in like the coverage aspect that this defense really needs right now. And Benford is here. Everybody else is just kind of clustered together as far as their capability right now. No, neither, White or Dorian Strong or Cam Lewis or any of these other corners that Buffalo has really shown me that they could be relied on week to week. It's too inconsistent thus far. And I think if you went back and checked the tape yourselves, you would see that too. Now, I got an interesting question earlier, and I actually put this in terms of like positions and stuff like that. There is a real case to be made when I look at these roster positions. I was just responding here. In terms of depth, okay, like across the board, I always made fun of the fact that Buffalo had Mitch Trubisky. They brought him back. I always thought that was kind of just corny. I don't know. I like it, but like I always kind of made some jokes about it. Like he was good enough to let go, but he was good enough to bring back too. Things like that. Just like I like to be sarcastic a little bit. Mitch is just a backup, you know what I mean? But then Mitch just shuts me right up when Josh Allen goes down. As I mentioned, he had the nose thing. Mitch Trubisky comes in and he just throws that 32-yard dot over the middle. I was like, I'm going to shut the hell up about Mitch Trubisky. He's earned it, being the backup. But outside of the quarterback depth, I would say in terms of like starting experience, get the MVP Josh Allen, you got a former, first round draft pick as your backup quarterback in Mitch Trubisky, which is, a luxury that not a lot of teams have, right? So you could say quarterback is a depth-filled position, but I would say the best position in terms of 1, 2, and 3 on the Bills roster is the tight end position. Buffalo's best roster position is the tight end position. For whatever reason, when Dawson Knox is doing well, fans rip on Kincaid. When Kincaid's doing well, fans rip on Knox. When Jackson Hawes does anything, it's okay, that's why we drafted Jackson Hawes, even though we had Knox and Kincaid. We just need to simmer down, simmer down, simmer down. Tight end is an extremely important position in this new age of the NFL. You look at every team that has a successful offense, they all have good tight ends, whether it's Detroit, whether it's San Francisco, barring injury, obviously, with George Kittle, whether it's Green Bay with Tucker Kraft, Buffalo, Dalton Kincaid, KC. No, I'm just kidding. KC, Travis Kelce still got a little juice left in that tank, but you get my point. Pretty much every team that has a decent tight end has an efficient offense. And the most efficient position on the really bad New Orleans Saints is the tight end position. So I look at Buffalo in terms of their snap percentages and things like that. I get really analytical sometimes with, my research, and Buffalo runs more 3 tight end sets than virtually any team in the NFL by a long shot. And that's why Jackson Hawes was drafted. That's why Jackson Hawes was viewed as an upgrade over Quentin Morris. He can block, he can catch, he can run routes. He's a very dangerous threat as a TE3 in an NFL offense. And you have Dawson Knox, who we know what he can do. We know that he can make a clutch catch on the sideline. He can get open in the end zone. Those are 2 things that tight ends need to be able to do in this NFL in order to, quote unquote, eat, as the kids say these days. And then you have Dalton Kincaid, who entering this 3rd season, I talked extensively about he needs to really show me more. And thus far, he's leading the Bills in receiving touchdowns with 2 in 3 games. So that's a good pace. I like that pace. We like that pace. So Dalton Kincaid's shown that he's getting better, slowly but surely. Yes, maybe a little bit, slower than people thought. They thought he'd be this, bad out of hell rookie like Sam Laporta was. But now you look at the roles and how they've reversed a little bit. Dalton Kincaid's kind of trending upward, whereas Sam Laporta really hasn't had a good year thus far. And granted, it's only 3 weeks into the season, but it's just interesting the timing of things and sometimes how you go back, you listen to certain conversations over again that the mainstream sports media had and even some local media. And Dalton Kincaid is making people eat some crow right now, and I'm enjoying it. So without a shadow of a doubt, the tight end position is one that I think Buffalo is going to continue to show is their best position because they have a quarterback that really wants to get these guys the ball. If he could split that football into 10 different pieces and throw it to 10 different receivers, he would. Week-to-week league, as we know, there's only one football, as we know, out on the field, right? And hopefully it's not too deflated like Tom Brady's footballs were. But, we'll see what happens as far as who leads the team in, receiving yards, receiving touchdowns, targets, you name it. I'm really pumped up for just the future, present and future, I should say, of the Bills tight end position. So what is the big Thomas takeaway, the Ryan Thomas takeaway from the first 3 weeks? I really miss doing the Thomas takeaways, and I wanted to bring them back. So my number one Ryan Thomas takeaway for the first 3 weeks is that Buffalo has 2 MVPs on their roster, potentially. One is Josh Allen, and the other is James Cook. Now, listen, I know very well that this league is a quarterback-catered league. It's a quarterback-driven league. I know that just as well as anybody, right? It's been a long time since a running back has won the MVP award. Prior to, Saquon Barkley's big year or during it, I thought he could win the MVP last year. Adrian Peterson, there were a few years where I thought he could have won MVP. I'm not as, I guess, refreshed on my recent MVP history. But one thing I do know is that it's far more common in the 90s to see a running back MVP than what it has been in the last 15 years. I would guarantee the majority of the MVPs over the last 25 years have been quarterbacks. But if I were to look at who isn't an MVP on this team or who could be right now through 2 weeks, it's Josh Allen and James Cook. And all the fans, myself included, that really could not stand this whole James Cook, contract situation. I have to say it again. I am glad thus far that they paid him. Now, that doesn't mean that there's moments during certain portions of a game where I wish James Cook would just lower the shoulder a little bit, right? But that's not who he is. That's not the style of play that he plays with. That's not the size that he has to do those things. It's not in his skill set. It would be more to his detriment to try to do something like that. But there are some times where, I wish there was a little bit of bite to his game. But last week, I thought I saw more of that bite than what I'd ever seen. And that could mean a few things. That could mean maybe he's kind of aging into his body a little bit here. He's entering the 25, 26 year, season, and he's getting really refreshed and refined into his body. And maybe he knew just as well as anyone, right? You know yourself better than you know anyone. You could have a year where James Cook puts together an even better year than what he did last year. And if James Cook does that, there is real chatter. If he's among one of those top 2 rushing leaders, like he is right now, he could be in the MVP discussion. I know it sounds crazy. I know it sounds like a little too early, too soon, but it makes sense. The offense is as good as its quarterback. Quarterback's best friend is running back, right? The run game opens up the pass, that whole analogy. Sometimes I've believed that when it works. And then there's times where I look at NFL history and I'm like, I don't know if I believe that. Tom Brady never had really an elite running back, right? He had some good ones, never had like a Walter Payton or an Emmitt Smith or Thurman Thomas, right? He never had those kind of league leading rushers. Those were never, a thing, because he was leading the way. Whereas in Buffalo, they've relied on Josh Allen so much over the last 8 years, really as a whole, in a variety of different ways. Rookie season, he's running for his life. He's trying to just stay alive and keep a play alive. Second season, he gets a little bit more comfortable with some veteran pieces in John Brown and Cole Beasley. Third season, he breaks out. A lot of that due to the addition of Stephon Diggs, who was in his prime at the time, coming from Minnesota, really had a chip on his shoulder to really show what he was made of at that time. Completely different scenario than what Stephon Diggs ended up being, or where he ended up being to where he is now. Completely different scenario, completely different player, right? And that's just continued to go like this. But with that, who were their running backs? You had Devin Singletary, you had Frank Gore at one point, you had Zach Moss at another point. James Cook was the biggest investment in the run game that the Buffalo Bills had since LeSean McCoy. And LeSean McCoy predates James Cook by what? 5, 6 years. So just goes to show you, that this league talked about this, and I always shake my head at it. The fact that the run game was dead. Like, running backs, they don't really matter. They do matter. When they're great, they matter. There's a huge difference between, Christian McCaffrey and, let's just say, LeGarrette Blount. And I'm not saying LeGarrette Blount was a bum. He won some Super Bowls, right? Something Christian McCaffrey's never done. But in terms of style and being an anchor on an offense, running back is extremely important. That position has never lost its importance in my eyes. And I think that it's one of the only positions outside of quarterback that is MVP worthy still in 2025's kind of new age social media NFL. So there you have it. I think Buffalo's got one MVP already, right? Josh Allen, potentially by this season's end, depending on how things shake up and shake out. James Cook could be the next MVP. Last question. Who's going to be our kicker? Matt Prater for the time being. Tyler Bass still week to week. So there you have it, everybody. I'm Ryan Thomas. That was the Thomas Takes Sports Podcast. Bills winning this one. I'm going to go 35-14. Buffalo moves to 4-0 with a 35-14 win. Josh Allen, 288 passing yards, 3 touchdowns. James Cook over 120 rushing yards, 2 touchdowns. There you have it. Buffalo Bills getting it done. Maybe a defensive touchdown as well sprinkled in. That could be something good for the fantasy football lineups out there. I am starting Buffalo's defense, and I'm looking forward to it. All right. Thank you so much for tuning in, everybody. Of course, I will see you when I recap things next week and preview the following week's game. Take care and go Bills.